So, can you talk a little bit about growing up in a childhood where art plays an important role and how that has impacted you today as your own role as a gallerist?
Yes, I was surrounded by beauty. We had the Himalayas. You woke up to the Himalayan mountain range. And it was, natural beauty was just a complete part of my existence.
But you also had your mother being a gallerist. I'm sure you must have also seen the good and the bad part, the hard part, and something that, you know. So, you, that would be a possibility.
I think it's also my education, doing economics, doing business management, working in the consulting firm. Um, you get spoiled.
Hello, welcome to the podcast, Gayatri. How are you?
Good. It's great to be here joining you.
Thank you
How
so
are you?
much. I'm very well. Let's start by getting to know you. Everyone who's listening, can you introduce yourself, who you are, where you're coming from, and a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Um, I actually started Art Incept 4 years ago. Uh, though I do not come from an art background, my mother was, in the art business for 25 years, and it was something I was exposed to all my life. Um, I actually was a consultant. I worked with Anderson, with EIU, and ran an education business. But somewhere I wasn't happy. I was looking for a greater purpose and I wanted work not to feel like work. And I think that's when Art Incept came about. Um, I think one of the real reasons Art Incept came about was because in India, what we saw was there was a huge amount of spotlight on established artists, names, masters, while a lot of really creative emerging artists were not given a platform. And also I think very important was that they were not given the kind of knowledge that one needed to navigate through quite a complicated art world. So that's how.
Absolutely. I think we share that in common for sure, right? Tell me something. Tell me something. Uh, One sec. Tell me something. Can we talk a little bit about? I will go where you started with art intercept, but also know, like you said, you did not come from an art background, but you also grew up in a lot of surrounded by art. Can you talk about your early experiences that have really shaped who you are today? You're running this gallery, you're working. How has those? Because I strongly feel the early years of our life they really, they become these navigating points and guides that really bring us back to who we are as we grow. So, can you talk a little bit about growing up in a childhood where art plays an important role and how that has impacted you today as your own role as a gallerist?
Okay, so I grew up in a very small town. I grew up in Darjeeling. Yeah. So, yes, I was surrounded by beauty. We had the Himalayas. You woke up to the Himalayan mountain range. And it was, natural beauty was just a complete part of my existence. You know, my mother was always involved in some form with art. Initially, she used to do a lot more around design, and then slowly started to kind of, collect art. And it started first as a collection, and then when we moved to Delhi, she set up an art gallery. So at a very early age, I used to keep seeing art around me, have conversations with artists. That always fascinated me. And I think even though, there was this whole tendency of picking up, I studied economics, did computer science. That was a very regular, expected field where, a woman wanted to kind of work and kind of create something for herself. It was just one of those things. But I remember that even in my when I first started the education company, I would kind of lean into design. I would love to kind of design stuff. With when my mom's gallery, I used to always design her brochures, though I had no formal training. So I think the creativity was something that I was really involved with. When I was in the UK, I even set up a Indian art gallery for 2 years with an interior designer, English interior designer in the UK, with what I was doing, and so it was always a part of my life, and I think I loved it so much, but never looked at it as a career because I think it was just something that you never thought of. And
But you also had your mother being a gallerist. I'm sure you must have also seen the good and the bad part, the hard part, and something that, you know, so you for the you that would be a possibility. Then what was that was holding you back? Because you had a mother who was also running a gallery, but what was that thing that y- didn't let you take the leap in the first place?
I think it's also my education, doing economics, doing business management, working in the consulting firm. Um, you get spoiled and terms of, but it's also you get trapped into the rat race. And and I think it was that point when I had to move back because my father wasn't well. So we moved back from the UK, and I think that's when I started thinking about purpose, about what I really enjoyed. There is that time when things are not going right, when it comes to family or losing someone. That's when you really start kind of questioning what you're doing. And and I was also at that point helping mom on a few things while I was working, and then I just decided, when I saw that there is this beautiful space where there are young artists who are doing such great work. There isn't anyone who's just looking at giving them a platform. I decided, okay, let me start small and then build it from there. And I think it's strange that all that you learn in business, is all applies in the art business, and there is the need.
It is pretty same. Irrespective if you're running a gallery or you're an independent artist, you're running a studio, at the end of the day, you have to treat it like a business if you want to do it sustainably.
Exactly. So I think now, I've found that space where I have everything.
Amazing. Tell me a little bit about your early years of Art Incept. Like, what did you expect? Lot of times, when we start something, sometimes there are good surprises and sometimes there are bad surprises. Something, oh, I didn't expect. You're in 4 years in, but can you talk a little bit about what you expected out of it and how it turned, some of your own struggles and hardships that you've experienced so far?
I think one of the toughest things was, when you're working with young emerging artists, they need a lot of support. You need to build the infrastructure that gives them a platform which is equivalent to, what a mid-level or a senior artist gets. But financially, it's very difficult to balance that because your emerging artist has to be priced at a point where a young collector who doesn't loves the work doesn't have to think twice before picking it up. Yet we need to be at an art fair, which is expensive. Otherwise, you don't provide them a platform for growth. So I think just saying that financially was a huge, in the initial years, it was a struggle.
And yeah.
But I think what's really interesting is that emerging art, which, I was always looking at the fact that, they're interesting, they're doing great work, they need a platform. But I think what you really realize when you're working with them is their voices are of today. It's about the problems, the connection of what's happening in the world today. It mirrors that, and I think that's really where there is a lot of interest because you started even yourself looking at the world around you a little differently. So you'll know.
Absolutely. What is the kind of work that you resonate with? And in specifically in all these years, what is the kind of work that you like to support more or connects with you and you feel like aligns with the values of the gallery? What does that look like?
So the gallery is very, very focused on bringing about raw voices. So no voices from. So it's really from the roots. So we are looking at artists who are from farmers' sons. Artists from the Andamans. Talking about problems or their lives in even marginal communities. So there's this real voices from all over in India. So it's not about like just what's happening in the city. So I think that's something we want to kind of continuously look at, is looking at a lot of artists from various parts and various communities coming forward and sharing their stories. So, I'll give you an example. I mean, one of our artists, Kutum, for example, he was, from a tribal space in Andamans, a daily wager's son, who was looking at art where his family didn't even understand that art was a career, you know? And from there, with very little working in a garage, he comes and studies art in India, Madhya, in Delhi. And how his story is about the tribal belt of Andamans. And then of course as they move to cities, how that changes. So yeah, so it's really, I think we are looking at raw stories coming from parts of India.
But how do you find these stories in artists? What is, how do you look at work? How do you find that this is, and how you also, as a gallery, I think as a gallery and as an artist, also as a gallery, as an artist or, art and art collector, it's like matchmaking. All of these things are like, you have to find a good fit of each other. How do you look for that match? How do you look for your artist? And you feel like, okay, this could be something that could be a good match for you and the gallery.
So we look at a number of things. Of course, we look at the backstory, you know, where the artist is from, what motivates them conceptually, how unique, the artist is. We also, as a gallery, look at skill and materiality, the kind of innovation that is in those areas. And so it's, I think, a combination of that. It's the concept, how unique that is, how real the story is, and how it connects with your heart, as well as the skill, the materiality, and the way they're implementing it, what they're kind of wanting to say, the expression.
You also said you came from the UK and then you also started working in India. I'm sure you must have spent some time even in the UK looking at the art world, how art was there, and then working in India. Do you see any kind of similarity and dissimilarity, let's say, in both the markets, in both in terms of as an art market, but also as artists, how you approach artists in the art that you're looking at?
I think there is a lot of differences, in terms of one. I think in India, you don't really have true art critiquing. So, there is no, I mean, there is very little research papers or, even writers who, analyze artists, and that could be positive as well as negative. So, to here, I think we don't really have any of that. So, there is. Second, I feel that, of course, more than anything else, the art market is very shallow, less evolved, uh, less educated right now. So I think there's a lot of need to kind of develop and a young collector base, so that artists could have a larger audience to show their art to. But you're seeing that change happen already in the last 3 4 years. you know when I moved back, it was, there was a huge difference 7 8 years back, and now there's, you are seeing that change happen.
Can you talk a little bit about this? You know, how this is so complex for a lot of people who don't understand, and specifically who don't get to speak and someone who's, let's say, for you, who's also come from a legacy of your mother being a part of the world. There's so many different kind of collectors. A lot of collectors in India at the beginning of the years have been about art has always been about I think it's always been on the top of the funnel. And like you said, a lot of the same work and a lot of the same artists are being shown and represented and the artwork. Uh, and that also has a lot to do with, okay, a lot of the artists' art was either done for investment, a lot of time it was prestige, there's so many different variables. But I think, when I see in the US and, in the West side, I think in India, craft is very deeply penetrated, right? I grew up in a smaller city and I see like from smaller to any big city now, craft has always been a part of our culture. It's not only top of the funnel, it's just from where we start, people will have. But art, if I say paintings or something like that, it still is something reserved for a very selected. It has changed over the time now. It has become a little bit of more democratized, but in the before that, I think it was still very limited to that audience. Versus in the West, I've seen, like, I've seen young girls who would, save up and they want to, if they move to their first apartment or if they have their room, they'll start by buying posters and then original prints and then limited editions, and then they'll buy their paintings. And it wasn't only for the rich, it was also for someone, like, for regular people. And I think that uh, increases the consumption and the maturity level, because they have this habit of collecting in different phases all through their life, and they eventually become original art collectors, or they're looking at contemporary art or modern art or whatever. What's your take on that?
So, I also kind of looked at that, and I also come from an education curriculum side. And if you look at the UK and even the US, um, art is a is a part of primary curriculum. You know, museum visits. Learning about famous artists. Their lives. It's a part of primary curriculum. And their reading lists always include a few famous artists that they have to read about their lives. So they are introduced to art and the importance of art, the stories, very early on in life. So there is a relationship created which I feel is missing here. And therefore it is for a gallery, for institutions to spread. They have a harder job to actually build these stories.
Right, right, right. And I think, yeah, that's really true, because um, I speak to so many people and so many people, friends, and in the US, and for them, they have been, even if they remotely think they've not been into the art world or they don't know anything about art, going to a museum has been something that, people go for recreation. Versus even today in India, a lot that does not happen. Like, very few families you'll see, specifically if there is that one person who somewhere comes from the art world, has the interest, is an artist, comes from a gallery, etc., will pull a few people and take you there. But very few families or people will see that they're going to museums. And I think it's increased over the time, but it's still not a norm. It's not as common.
True, true.
Okay, tell me how are young collectors and contemporary art the mindset of a young collector versus mature, more seasoned collectors. What are the trends that you're seeing, the behaviors? And I'm asking this also because a lot of artists that listen to the podcast are also self-representing. Um, Thanks to social media, we do not still have so many enough galleries. A lot of artists get the chance to represent themselves, to support their career, to sustain their their creativity. What if someone is an emerging market, what should they know about the early collectors, and how can they become better in approaching or attracting them?
It's a good question and a tough one to answer also, because we still are, very, very focused. A lot of collectors are very focused on the first question we get is this a good investment? The second question is, I mean, do you have X artist and Y artist? Because it tends to be that my friend has that artist, and it's recognizable, and it's something that if someone walks into their home, they'll clearly recognize. Um, so, what we found is that you have to kind of look at the young collectors interested in stories, and communicate your story, what's behind your heart. The visuals are important, but I think the backstory is equally important. You have to connect, they need to kind of connect with what you are as a person, who you are, and how that expression comes, in your art. And that's what we try to do as much as possible.
What are your tips? How do artists, let's say, let's break it down for them, for everyone who's listening. How do we do specifically also, what is your perception in that? Look at social media. Do you look at artists on social media? If so, what do you specifically look at and how do you connect with them?
So we are always looking at social media because our job is to be, yeah, in terms of our job is really to kind of always look at artists, what they're doing, see growth. Um, I think what really attracts you is, especially and social media is a very, very important tool for artists working out of their studios. Um, what we see and look for is, one, the visual. Of course, that's the first attraction. And then the second thing that's really always interests me is the process. And so it's nice to see an artist's process and how they're working, the how different that is. And I think artists should talk about their work. That watching somebody talk about their work and what's behind their work and give an emotive connect, I think that really works.
Wonderful. What is the last person, artist you've been rolling over on social media? Do you have any name? Someone who's on your mind. Someone who's on your mind. Let's see what social media does.
Yeah, strangely, I don't. That's a very tough one for me to answer.
Yeah, we look at so much work. There's so much that we like and very little we remember. I think in a time of social media, what's also become harder is to have a very strong recall. Yeah, we see so much that it's so hard to remember. And the save button, it continually goes and goes and goes, and it's
Actually, now I've stopped saving because I never go back. you know?
Yes, absolutely. I agree with that for sure. And then it goes in the sea. Sometimes, even though I remember I saved something, and so even for our business, we have so many accounts. For my art, I have account, and I'm like, I don't know where I saved it, and now when I really need it, I don't know where it is.
Yes. No, no, I totally agree.
Amazing. What are your tips for, let's say, artists specifically who who want to get a gallery representation and want that support system? What does a working relationship with a gallery look like? What to expect? I think a very common conversation within the creative community as artists I've seen is that there is a lot of confusion with what they expect um, in this partnership and collaboration. A lot of times they are, either the gallery is not clear or the art is not clear, and there's no clear communication on how and what they need to expect out of each other. What are your what is your experience and take on that? What does a relationship for you also look like?
I think with Art Incept, it's a little different because we say we are mentors first before we are a gallery. As you know, we run the Inception grant, which we get about, in fact, 1,000 applications every year. In fact, later I can talk to you about here where, we see how artists go wrong when it comes to presentation of their portfolios.
Yes, yes, let's talk about that as well.
But in terms of a gallery, I think, you should find a gallery that kind of truly understands your work and is focused on promotion, which is more than commercial. Because initially, I think that's really important for young emerging artists. um,
What do you mean by more than commercial?
what happens is, very often what will happen is there are galleries that look at relationships that are short term, so therefore they might even let you price higher, for example, but there's certain things like pricing which is critical. In fact, we spend so much time telling our artists how to price right, and pricing too high can be highly dangerous, because once you price your work and you have one or two collectors buy it, that is your benchmark. So I think you're looking at a gallery that is not looking at a commercial, completely. So there are, a lot of galleries who look at long term growth of artists and work with artists. So I think that is something that artists should look out for, is look out for how a gallery kind of looks at long term growth, how they build relationships with their artists. um, and you know I think it's not just about showing an artist, it's about looking at how they are represented in residencies, how they are in shows outside a gallery show, and I think to build a holistic kind of a program for an artist, I think is really important. And therefore, it's also important for artists to kind of look at galleries in that format.
Wonderful. And what about your suggestions in looking and submitting at work?
I think that is one of the things that is really, really important, because even if you are approaching a gallery, you must be aware that a gallery gets hundreds of portfolios, and because it's their job, they have a quick look at it, you know. So I think rather than sending 100 artworks, you need to pick the 10, 12 best works, and that again you have to be very careful on what you select. And maybe it's good to kind of run it by two or three of your friends, your peers, and like pick the best 10, 12 artworks. Write your story, take help, but ensure that you have an artist statement, you know a short biography that really tells the gallery about you, you know apart from those long biodatas which many of us don't even read, because what's really interests you is those 10, 12 images that you send. Either you are sold on that or you are not. So I think when someone sends you 100 images that include, you know 7, 8 which are not that nice, you might just see those 7, 8 and might not see the rest, which is good.
The rest of them, yeah. What do you also recommend? Do you love the in situ or the install shots, or do you love the detailed shots and just the artwork? What should people add to their portfolios?
I think it's also depends on your materiality. So if you're using materials that don't totally show in a photograph, then ensure you have an install shot that shows the materiality of your product, of your artwork. I think that's really critical. So it has to be looking at your artwork, the best way it can be represented in that short 3 minutes that any, person is going to look at your work. Yeah.
Someone's looking at your work. Yeah. What about your take on artists and, looking at their website, how they're putting themselves out there? Do you really do you guide your artists in that context? Like bare minimum that you feel like in today's time an artist should be at least doing this, have a website, have an Instagram, have a put together portfolio. Like what do you think are those checkpoints if we were to list?
I think it's really important. In fact, we have training sessions with our artists. We have a marketing strategy person who actually does Zoom calls to kind of explain to artists how to photograph their work. How to kind of be present in social media, how to kind of comment. Um, Always, and like if you're working with a gallery or if you're at a show, how to tag people, so I think these are very important aspects, because ultimately you're part of a community, you want to be heard, you want to be seen. and you have to do those, little things that make you visible. And website is important for that next level, but I think the social, at this moment, the first level of connect is still social media
Social media, yeah, you make sure that,
or a show. Yeah, of course.
yeah. What is also a lot of artists have this mindset, which is very, I think, subjective. A lot of times people are scared that they feel like they haven't shown their work enough. They don't have somewhere to start off. What is your suggestion to them? How can people get that head start for them if they're just looking out for taking that first step?
I think one is, of course, build. I mean, like, getting to a gallery, getting to a show takes time, and therefore, before you get there, use social media, and take the trouble to make a great portfolio, you know, take the trouble to photograph your works, well, take the trouble to kind of write your purpose and your, artist statement, and pick, galleries, pick curators. There's a bunch of curators who are always looking for, fresh voices. Pick residencies. Be out there as much as you can.
Amazing. And okay, tell me, what is your take on how the art world in India specifically is changing? What do you think is exciting about where we are today? Because I think India is changing a lot. There's so much happening, not only for people who are in India. I think the art world in India is also becoming a very good global spot. The artists from India also are becoming a very global spot.
I think it's very exciting being part of the art world today in India. You know, um, there was a time when people didn't really care on what was on their walls. A poster, some old, hand me down, image, didn't really matter. Today, with interior design, architects and interior designers doing advisory, at least what's become established is we need to have something on our walls, you know now, and that means the process has started. So it is interesting to see the fact that nearly anyone is looking at something in their walls. They might start with prints, they might, but slowly move towards artwork. So I think there's a huge new market emerging. I think also when it comes to the young generation, and which is why I love working with emerging artists, is they are fearless. They are so bold. They kind of work with varied materials. Today you see, print with fabric and stitching. You see artists using mud, you see artists using cement, you see artists using iron with, so various different forms, huge materialities becomes so, it's so interesting.
Yeah, that's a huge materiality. It's no longer painting. But also, you know what's unique? I feel it's so much about India also because we as a country are very tactile and we have such varied materials, and we're also very grounded in the sense because there is a rural India, there's of course a new India, so there is this extreme form where we have so many talented AI artists like who are playing with technology, who are using AI as a medium. But there are also on the other extreme, there are artists who are working with very very tactile, like bamboos or like calves, and like we have Subodh Gupta, like there's like it's such a good spectrum, and there's so many people who lie in between. And like I use embroidery as a very big part of, and that has to come from my own influence because I grew up in a part of the world, in Agra, where embroidery was a huge influence, Indian architecture, Mughal architecture, and that reflects in the person I am, the art I do, the art I buy everything. And I think since India is so diverse, that we all have such unique experiences that it translates into our work.
True. And I think also over time, we are very proud of where we come from, initially. So, and you're seeing that in the art. Yeah, you're seeing that in the art. You're seeing artists make their own paper out of agriculture waste. You're seeing artists take old kantha fabric and stitch it together. So, there's just so much happening that it's actually yeah.
Plastic, there are clothes being made out of, like, I was seeing a video last night which was weavers from India, and this is I have it saved. This was this particular woman, and she is the only person who takes these plastic waste, and I don't know how short of a time she does, and she weaves it into fabrics. And there was something very unique about her story, and it was so nice how even the artisan level, how that innovation and that creativity is going there. And I also feel like now India is also, and the world is also recognizing how craft in itself, like how it was treated in a very different manner versus how craft is such a big part of what the art world is.
True, true. Today you see a lot.
Yeah. Okay, last question. Tell me something about the innovation grant that you have and the gallery, and where's the gallery, what's exciting for you, what you're working on and you want to share with us.
So we have, in fact, the most exciting time for us. Our Inception Grant finalist show opens in Triveni on the 2nd of March. So yeah, so that's always exciting for us because through the year we have our gallery artists, we work with them, but this is that one time that just completely fresh voices, new work that we present, and talk about them, and that's what's going to happen. So we are enjoying that. Yeah. And in terms of the gallery, I mean, of course, it's we have a huge number of shows planned, and but I think what we are like really really excited about is we are looking at collaborations in the next year. One is, of course, collaborating with other galleries to try and bring this kind of a network where all of us focus only on one thing. Is it's not about our artists and their artists, it's about together how we kind of build a community and build a larger art market where more people enjoy. And I feel anyone who buys art are, are happier people, you know
Yeah, absolutely.
so we want.
Anyone who makes art and buys, I think art in its way is such a soulful connection.
Yeah, so it's just we want more people to buy art largely because they're going to be happier, you know
I think that's such a good purpose.
And of course, we're looking at also, collaborations in areas like craftspeople with contemporary artists. So we're looking at like a few new projects that we start, and that's exciting us.
Wonderful. That's so nice. And it was so nice talking to you, Gayatri. Okay, one last thing. Where people can find you, support you, where can people follow you and the gallery? Can you let us know that?
Okay, so in terms of follow us, we are Art Incept, ARTINCEPT on Instagram, as well as our website's the same. You can find us in Gurgaon. We have an office in tiny gallery space in South Point Mall in Golf Course Road of Gurgaon. And that's, yeah, I mean, we are, we'd love to kind of get feedback. We'd love support and look forward to more people connecting with us.
That's so nice. I will make sure that I will link everything that Gayatri spoken about, the gallery, the images, the website of the gallery, and some of the artworks that we have already seen on the website. And make sure you do support them, do follow them on Instagram. And thank you so much, Gayatri, for joining us. Any final words before we end this?
I think it's my one thing is it's I think we are all fortunate to be part of the art community, and and it's great that we I got this opportunity in terms of starting Art Incept. So I look forward to interacting with everyone, and stay true to your art.
Thank you so much, and I hope to see you soon again.
Thanks so much. Bye.